Hello and welcome to another video of the character animation series by Thilakanathan Studios. I'll be giving a brief overview of the 5 most annoying things about character animation in Blender. This is purely personal opinion. Some people may disagree and actually enjoy some of the stuff that I mentioned. First up, interacting with props. This is the one thing I hate, having to set up controls every time a character interacts with some object. The truth is, character animation can be a lot more interesting and fun to watch if it interacts with something. One way to do this is to manually animate the objects. In other words, say for example your character dances while holding a ball. Well, you'd animate the ball by simply repositioning and keying the ball everywhere the hand moves. But this is not efficient and wastes a lot of time. There is a quicker method though. In Blender, you need to set up constraints every time your character interacts with an item, and you'll need to make sure it's keyed properly when animating. This can be a pain and tends to be time consuming if your character needs to interact with a lot of objects. I tend to minimize prop usage in my work if I want to get an animation done as quick as possible, but if you're patient, the results can look awesome. Second, interacting with characters. Now this does sound a little similar to interacting with props, but a lot more complexities are added in. It is recommended to also use constraints, since manually animating both characters can be very time consuming. Both characters tend to have movement, and thus it is important to establish who leads the movement. Say for example in a handshake, you need to decide which character will have the handshake animated keyframes and which character will just follow along. This gets a little bit more challenging if you have a more complex type of animation, such as 2 characters playing tug of war for instance. Who leads the animation and who follows? Realistically, you may need to switch between the two. Other things to consider from what I've experienced is that if you have 2 characters talking to each other, it's important that you make sure their eyes are looking directly at each other, especially if the characters continually move around. Of course, they can look away if they are pondering, for example, or if they're a bit shy or whatever, but what I mean is don't make it look like their eyes are just looking randomly elsewhere. Otherwise, it can at times appear as if they're blind. Changing between IK and FK. It's a little bit early in the series to explain what IK and FK is. There is another video down the series dedicated to IK and FK, but very simply put, IK is used to control arms and legs using one bone, and the child bones sort of adjust to look natural. Whereas with FK, you manually control the arms and legs using the separate bones. Now that probably sounds a bit confusing, and I think I even confused myself, but nevertheless, switching between FK and IK may be necessary for better character animation. The first image uses FK since the arms move along with the body, and the second image probably uses IK since the hands are rooted to the wall and the rest of the arm bones sort of readjust to the body's movements. Both these images were obtained from Wikimedia, and these were the best examples that I could find. I know the second animation is not exactly a 3D animation, and it's probably a cartoon, which was hand-drawn, but I'm just assuming here that it's a 3D character model. These were obtained from wikimedia.org, which is a free image downloading website. FK and IK actually make character animation easier, to be honest, but it is annoying to switch back and forth, especially when you're a beginner and using Blender. Having said that, the newer version of Blender has an updated Rigify rig that now attempts to make FK-IK switching a breeze. Surely I have to give that a go and tell you guys how that experience went. Walking and run cycles are just annoying, and I mean really annoying. I always refer to reference video and tutorials to get the poses and timing right. Walk and run cycles are one of the first things we'll learn in the character animation series, and we'll be trying to inject some of the 12 principles into the animation. I consider walk and run cycles to be quite tedious when working on film projects and such. One of the things that can be confusing is if you have a character that needs to walk or run from, say, point A to point B in exactly 3 seconds, you need to make sure that final step lands on point B once you hit that 3rd second. Another thing which I struggle with is, say for example, if your character needs to make turns, or for instance, if he needs to vary his walking speeds while he's walking, and things like that. These are situations where I sort of struggle even till today. For these situations, I almost always rely on reference video. Here is my first walk cycle for a short film. a very bad walk cycle. I just looped the walk cycle and animated the whole character to move forwards. Of course, the timing was just a guess, and as a result, you get sliding feet. Also, this is a common mistake that most beginners actually make, the sliding feet error. This was a very common feature of most of my earlier animations. Also, another mistake here that I didn't really notice was that the character appears to hover over the ground for some reason, which is gravitationally incorrect. Facial animation. Once you've completed all the body animation, you then move on to the facial animation. At this point, I usually get exhausted, but it's important that you spend a lot of time getting the facial expressions down packed, as the face is a primary focus of your audience. Your audience wants to see what emotion your character is expressing, so that they can relate to what the character is feeling. As such, your character's facial expressions need to be expressive and clear. You don't want to have your character looking cheerful and happy at a friend's funeral, for example. Most beginner animators tend to either overdo the expressions or underdo them, and as a result, we as the audience can't really relate to the story. This image here is an example from my current animation film project, and I don't know if I've overdone it or underdone it, but there's some facial expression examples. Here is another poor example of bad facial animation. Again, it's from my first film, Thilakanathan. The character's expressions are a little bit overdone, I feel. Creating convincing facial animation is just hard, which is why it's a little bit annoying. And the final one, cloth and hair animation. Now, I know I said 5 most annoying things, but I've added a 6th as I consider cloth and hair animation as a process that can be skipped and you can sort of get away with it. Till date, I've only done cloth and hair animation once, and I'm sort of dabbling into it in my current film project. I rely on simulation to get believable cloth and hair animation. You can also manually animate cloth and hair if you have a sort of low poly setup, if you have a more cartoony model. But if you're using particle for cloth, particle for hair, and just using normal cloth, then you may need to use simulations for it, because manually animating hair, for example, is a little bit difficult. In Blender, setting up cloth and hair simulations can be a pain and can take up a lot of storage and CPU really, really quickly. For this reason, I tend to actually stay away from any form of cloth and hair animation as much as possible. Again, here is my attempt at cloth and hair animation from that same film. This took a lot of time to set up and also was quite heavy on my computer to render. But that was 4 years ago on an average dual-core PC, and at a time where my skills with Blender were not that great. We will look at doing more convincing cloth and hair animation throughout this series. And that's it. Thank you for watching. The next video will be about planning and storyboarding your next animation masterpiece. So tips and tricks about how to bring your idea into a reality, and some free software tools you can use to build your own storyboard. As usual, if you have any comments or feedback, please feel free to drop one in the comments below. And hope to see you in the next video.